Criminals in Sweden pulled off a seemingly flawless heist that made history. While most heists involve violence or threats, this one stood out for its lack of direct harm to anyone. The crew operated with precision, avoiding physical confrontations, which contributed to their reputation as gentlemen thieves. However, the celebrations after the successful heist by the robbers were short-lived. This is the story of the Västberga Helicopter Heist.
In the early hours of September 23, 2009, a group of professional thieves launched a sophisticated operation against a G4S cash depot in the Västberga district of Stockholm, Sweden. The G4S cash depot was considered one of the most secure facilities in Stockholm. It had reinforced walls, bulletproof glass, and state-of-the-art surveillance systems. However, the robbers took advantage of a vulnerability few had considered. The criminals behind the heist were well organized and had planned their actions meticulously. They knew they needed a way to get in and out quickly and without being detected. To achieve this, they stole a Bell 206 helicopter from Roslagen's helicopter base in Norrtälje. At around 5:15 in the morning, the helicopter, stolen earlier that night, landed on the G4S high-security building in Västberga, Stockholm. 3 masked men jumped out of the helicopter. One of the robbers was holding a sledgehammer, trying to break G4S reinforced glass on the rooftop so that the robbers could break into the building. The one with the hammer was none other than a 35-year-old robber named Sherwan Safa Kadum, son of Iraqi immigrants living in Sweden. Accompanying him were his partners, 36-year-old Charbel Chavro, a physical education teacher of Syrian descent, born and brought up in Sweden, and 37-year-old Mikael Sodergran, a Swedish who was an explosives fanatic. The robbers used 2 ladders to enter the building from the rooftop and later used mini-explosives to blow up the security doors to make their way into the cash room. The masked robbers knew the layout. The main vault is on the 2nd floor, but the cash is counted in a room on the 6th floor. However, the robbers believed that there wouldn't be any staff inside the depot at that moment, but at least 14 employees were inside the building at the time of the robbery. They clearly had bad info. They had been working since 7 p.m. and now only had a few minutes left of their shift. They became aware of a persistent noise, which was the robbers' helicopter. The group leader went out to check and quickly returned to order the staff to quickly secure the money. As soon as they heard the blasts, the employees sent most of the money down the elevator, while the small bills were locked in the metal cages. The robbers used buzzsaws to break through padlocks on the cash cages. The Swedish police arrived at 5:25 but did not intervene due to reports of the use of submachine guns. The robbers filled their bags with money. There's $150 million inside the cash facility, so even a slice of that will make a comfortable retirement fund for the boys. The estimated amount stolen was around 39 million Swedish kroner, which is about $5.3 million. After 20 minutes, the helicopter returned to the rooftop to whisk them away to the pre-arranged hideout location. Swift as shadows, the perpetrators used rope lines to hoist themselves back into the helicopter. By 5:35, they were away with the money. The pilot handling the helicopter was Alexander Eriksson, a TV producer and cameraman who was a drug addict. Eriksson also worked as marketing manager for a wind power company he had co-funded with his uncle. Eriksson owed some money to the wrong lot, which most likely motivated him to be a part of the heist. The 4th major player in the gang, 43-year-old Goran Bojovic, the oldest of the lot, referred to as the boss. He was a first-generation Swedish citizen whose parents were immigrants from Montenegro. Before the heist, Bojovic had contacted a former Stockholm gangster named Milan Sivo. He was already under surveillance by the Serbian authorities, who had been tapping his calls when they came across his conversation with Bojovic, where he mentioned a heist for which he needed a helicopter pilot. The authorities didn't know when and where the robbery was going to take place, but they knew that the robbers were going to target a cash depot in Stockholm. On August 27, 2009, at least a month before the robbery, the Serbian Foreign Ministry informed Swedish authorities about the plot involving a helicopter, soon after which they put Bojovic under surveillance to find out more about his plans. But you see, Bojovic was a criminal mastermind. He knew how the law enforcement authorities worked and was therefore able to trick the undercover and surveillance officers at every interval. To ensure the police were delayed, the gang placed explosive devices around Stockholm and planted foot pegs in the form of chains with welded screws on the roads leading to the depot to prevent police cars from gaining access. They also targeted the police's helicopter hangar by placing bombs on the police helicopter base at meticulous on the island of Värmdö. Police got to their helicopter hangar and saw the criminals had placed a bag-marked bomb at the police heliport, so they evacuated the area. When bomb explosive units were sent onto the scene, they realized that the bombs were fake. Police were outsmarted. Two JS-39 Gripen were conducting a drill over the Baltic Sea, and the Swedish Air Force offered assistance. It was turned down since the robbery was a civilian matter and not a military one. The first of the men and a section of the loot were deposited in the Drage district in the Norsborg suburb before a second drop-off was made at Kaananbade Beach in the Bromma area. Hours after the robbery, police located the stolen helicopter in a wooden area. The helicopter was found at 8:15 in the woods just outside a field at Skavloten in Arninge, 20 kilometers north of Stockholm. The robbers abandoned the helicopter, but not without a cheeky message. An empty champagne bottle and cigarette butts were found inside. This subtle taunt led media outlets to dub them the gentleman thieves, though investigators weren't as amused. Investigators discovered that the gang had an inside connection at the G4S depot. This individual provided critical details about the depot's layout, cash movements, and security schedules. This insider role was instrumental in the heist's success. The gang reportedly used encrypted communication and burner phones to coordinate their efforts. This made it harder for police to track their movements until after the heist. After the robbery, the DNA sample procured from the crime scene played an important role in catching the criminals. One of the robbers cut his hand on the ladder, and that fatal error allowed police to quickly identify Iraqi-born Swede Safa Kadhum through his DNA. The police had DNA evidence against two other main culprits, Alexander Eriksson, DNA obtained from the abandoned helicopter and the GPS tracker, and Mikael Sodergran, DNA traces found on the detonator wires inside the depot. In the case of Bojovic and his one-time associate Charo, the police didn't have any real evidence at hand and had to rely on the profilers. 2 days after the robbery, Safa Kadhum flew to the Dominican Republic, where he was arrested by local law enforcement at the Swedish government's request. Swedish police immediately chartered a private plane to bring him back to Sweden. Alexander Eriksson instead flew to the Canary Islands. He was met at the airport by a special operations unit of the Swedish police. Suspected mastermind Goran Bojovic, who'd been spotted driving his new BMW around town, was arrested in his apartment, where a bag of cash is seized. A total of 10 individuals were eventually charged and convicted in connection with the crime. Despite the arrests, some of the stolen money was never recovered, suggesting the gang may have had accomplices or sophisticated laundering methods. 7 men were sentenced to prison terms in October 2010 for their participation in the robbery. 3 men were cleared of all charges, and investigators suspect around 20 people are somehow linked to the heist, which means more than half of the crew is still on the loose. Helicopter pilot Alexander Eriksson, Swedish, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Robber Safa Kadhum, Iraqi, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Organizer Charbel Charo, Syrian, was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Organizer Mikael Sodergran, Swedish, was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Organizer Goran Bojovic, Montenegro, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Falsified alibi provider Marcus Axelsson, Swedish, was sentenced to 2 years in prison, and falsified alibi provider Thomas Broman, Swedish, was sentenced to 1 year in prison. For law enforcement, the case exposed critical flaws in infrastructure security, particularly at sensitive sites like cash depots and police facilities. It also highlighted the importance of intelligence sharing and rapid response coordination in countering organized crime. Following the heist, G4S Depot reviewed and upgraded its security policies, focusing on roof vulnerabilities and emergency response plans. The incident prompted cash management companies worldwide to reassess their practices,